Are you ready to break free from a conventional life and achieve financial independence through your version of tiny living, but you're feeling stuck trying to figure out the money part? Does the pressure to conform to societal norms make it even more difficult to embrace an unconventional lifestyle? Well, you're in the right place. I'm Laura Lynch, host of the Less House, More Moolah podcast, where every Thursday I'll bring you captivating interviews with individuals who have successfully made the transition to tiny living. They defied expectations and are thriving in their unique lives. We'll also dive deep into industry resources to address common financial concerns on your tiny journey. Together, we'll explore the emotional and practical aspects of pursuing an alternative lifestyle. I will describe a clear framework for project planning and cash flow management. Our goal is to intentionally build financial security and make a positive impact through our alternative American dream. So gear up for an exciting and empowering journey to create a life that truly resonates with you. Let's dive into today's episode and take the first steps towards financial independence and purpose through tiny living. Welcome to Less House, More Moolah, Barbara Talisman. I'm super excited to have you here for the guest. Barbara is a solo traveler, a change agent. She is an advisor. She's a YouTuber. She's a podcaster. She's a blogger. She is all the things when it comes to travel. So I am super excited that you are here to talk to us about stuff and downsizing and minimalist and some of the psychology behind that and what you went through. So thanks for being here.
Oh, Laura, I am so thrilled that you reached out and that we can have this conversation. It's all good. What travel is always better when you have less stuff.
I know. It is so great and sort of serendipitous and amazing the way that we connected, because I just was on my way, into town, listening to the market news. And here you were on the financial news. And I'm like, who is this chick and how do I meet her?
I was so glad you reached out. It was sort of that 15 minutes or less of fame. I think it was only 3 minutes, but it was just really, it was a nice response on NPR Marketplace to how people are living. It was more about like household, like what is your household like and what does it look like? Yeah. And I don't have a house. So the one behind me is a beautiful house sit. So I love other people's houses. It's like other people's boats. You have all the joy and none of the upkeep.
I know. It's so great. People are giving themselves permission to live different lives now. And that is the amazing thing that has created this podcast and my business and everything. It's about allowing us to expand our imagination around how we live our lives.
Without question. And I think COVID did that. I think younger folks have done that. We were just talking about that this morning at the club that I have access to because of this wonderful homeowner that I'm house sitting for. And we were just talking about how people graduating from college aren't necessarily going into jobs like we did. Mm-hmm. And that YouTube or social influencing, for good or bad, whatever you want to call it, is a job that they are actually making more money at than I could ever have thought of making at their age when I got out of college. So it's a whole new world. And I think the whole COVID thing was work anywhere, do anywhere, go anywhere, as long as you get your job done. And then when we were talking about coming back, Politico said, Politico said, as long as you deliver, we don't care how you do it or where you are. I mean, they care how, obviously it's a investigative news thing, but they didn't care, like, were they at home or did they come into the office? So I think everybody's taken to the road.
Yeah. I know. And so much freedom and so much ability to realign our lives with, things that are important to us and things that we've aspired to do. And yet we thought we had to wait until someday down the line to get that autonomy to be where you wanted to be. And now we have permission. Some people, not everybody, have permission to be where they want to be and be doing the things they want to do earlier in life and not having to wait, which is such an amazing blessing of the time that we're living in.
Well, I've seen two big swings. One is I want to live my life the way I want to live my life. On the road, in a smaller place, in a larger place, on a moving vehicle, right? The other one are aging parents or aging friends, and being able to take their time to take care of somebody who may be in a difficult situation. And in just being able to say, look, I can work from there and I'm going to go there. And so I think both of those, as you said, were sort of a blessing that people had that opportunity. It wasn't about taking vacation time or family leave. It was just about being where they needed to be at the moment. So whether it's for yourself or for others, it is a wonderful opportunity. If we look at it as an opportunity, I think it was a challenge for lots of folks, but those of us with glass half full, it was an opportunity.
For sure. All right. Awesome. So let's dive into some of the ideas and questions around your story and how you've come to live this really unique lifestyle. So you told a story on Marketplace, and so I want to kind of go back to that. Tell us a little bit about your home growing up and what you learned from your mother.
Well, so my home growing up, it sort of story starts 1968 when mom divorced my dad, two young girls, 8 and 6, and living in Shaker Heights, Ohio, where you don't divorce a man. Back in 1968, you got married, got pinned, you got married, you had kids, and she was a school teacher because that was appropriate. I don't even think she needed to work. I think dad probably did fine. We had a nice big house. And then after divorce, we didn't have a big house. I don't remember really getting rid of stuff, but I remember living in apartments after that. We never owned a house after that. And in 1973, so 5 years later, at the age of 36, she sold most of what we had and bought a VW Vanagon, or wagon. It was orange with the pop-up top that is ubiquitous, I think, back then, that people knew about.
Yeah.
Brand new stick shift, and said, we're going across country. So I think that was maybe the first purge I had. She got rid of the apartment. So we didn't have any place to live except in the van. And we traveled around the United States from Cleveland, Ohio, south, west, north, and then east across, and came back about, I don't know, probably 2 to 4 weeks truant from school. But she was a teacher, so she said she was homeschooling. So that was probably my first purge.
Yeah, awesome. So from there and that first lesson, how did you feel about your accumulation of stuff throughout your life? Did you feel like connected to the things, or were they kind of take them or leave them?
At the time, back then?
Well, just since that time, you had that first sort of purge at that age. And then throughout your later years, did you sort of still attach to stuff?
Oh, yeah, because I was in retail all through high school and college. So I was definitely a girly girl with the clothing and the whole thing. I remember going to college with way too many clothes and clothes I didn't need, So it was a process for sure. And then I also was a big chef cook. I went to culinary school and a couple of other things, and worked at a cooking store. And so with the discount, accumulated a lot of cooking kitchen stuff. And when I got divorced, I basically opened the doors and said, Jeff, whatever you want, just take it, because we had plenty. And then I moved into a place on my own, and I had my own business. So it was a 2-bedroom, and I was moving into a smaller place. And again, opened my kitchen cabinets and told my girlfriends to come in and just take anything they wanted. And they just said, oh, but we'll hold it for you. I said, no, I'm not entertaining. I mean, it was entertaining stuff, platters and duplicates of things. And I was single, and it wasn't that I wasn't entertaining, but we all went out to dinner. No one was cooking at home. So that was sort of partial purges, mostly for size and because I didn't want to pack it up anymore. Mm-hmm. And then the big one, when I moved from Washington, D.C. to Melbourne for a job to live there, I actually moved to Australia in college, but I don't remember that. I only remember bringing probably like 2 suitcases with me. I was living in a dorm. It didn't matter. So when I moved to Australia, they moved me. They moved everything. I said, do I have a limit? And they go, no, just bring whatever you want. So I sort of didn't downsize much. But when I came back, I had sold everything I had. And I came back with 2 suitcases, like the big check suitcases, like carry-on. And I mailed back 2 24 by 24 by 24 boxes, and brought my bike on the plane with me, my road bike. And so no furniture, no nothing, no silverware, stayed with some friends and started house sitting when I came back to the States. So that was, I would say that was probably purge number 1 as an adult, like on my own, setting up house with nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is something that, I see the comments on Facebook and people just really struggle with this, getting rid of stuff. So can you describe for the listeners how you're currently keeping a roof over your head and where you are?
I am currently in Marin County in California, and I am house sitting. And so my deal is overhead is my biggest expense. So if I can eliminate that expense, I can travel for as much as I want and for as far as I want. And so, and I'm also following the sun. Having grown up in the Midwest, I don't want to see snow anymore. So I'm done with that, unless I choose to. And I actually don't have clothes for it. So if I need to go snow, I need to go like to TJ Maxx and buy something that will keep me warm. And so these house sits, minimum of a week. And most of them for me are 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And I'll actually be in this area for a month, a little bit over a month, and 2 different houses, but long term in each of them. And so I've been doing this I did it to get to Australia. I did a 6-week house sit in Australia, which was beautiful, in Melbourne. And that got me over to Melbourne for their summer down under. And then this started May 1st and will go all the way to the end of October. No overhead and, a couple of hotel rooms, like a day or two in between.
So you mentioned the house sit thing earlier. So it sounds like this wasn't a first time idea. How did you first come across this house sitting thing?
When I came back from Australia, I have dear friends. And if you're in Vegas, a lot of the homes have, they call them casitas, which are these little like mother-in-law houses, no kitchen, but it's like a little hotel room kind of thing on the property. And my friends had one and I knew they did. And before I started thinking about coming back, I asked if I came back, they said, oh yeah. And they jokingly call it the home for wayward women because there are a bunch of women like that recovered from surgery and whatever. And so, yeah, they said, fine. So I knew what that was and I'd visited them many times before. And then I thought, well, I could probably keep our friendship a lot longer if I found someplace else to stay in between because I didn't have a job. I didn't have a car. I wasn't sure. I just come back from Australia and I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing. But again, I had some money, but I didn't want to blow it all on an apartment that then I couldn't afford later. Right. So because I didn't have a job. So I thought, if I house sit and I got out from underneath them and they weren't like that. They were like, oh, you don't have to do that. I was like, no, it's okay. Found trusted house sitters, set up a profile. I had walked dogs and cats in Washington, D.C. in my apartment there when people traveled a lot. And they weren't really overnights. It wasn't a house sit. Mm-hmm. Midday walking, evening walking, weekends when they went away. So those folks wrote me recommendations on Trusted House Sitter, which started the profile. And then I started looking in Las Vegas. And I found this wonderful couple with a couple of cats and this beautiful home. And I joke that, I walk into all these homes and go, oh my gosh, I could live there. It's not that I really care about the home. And people are always, when I'm interviewing, are always saying, oh, the house. And I'm like, I'm really more interested in the animal. Like that's what I'm there for, and I can make myself comfortable anywhere. So I found these 2 women and they ended up doing a lot of traveling. And so during that course, I was like doing a week and then 2 weeks and, whatever. And so I got out from under my friend's hair and then I'd come home, and then I got a car and then I got a job and then I got an apartment. So it was sort of an interim thing, not for travel, but more of getting my own space and giving them some space. And then I just picked it up again when I came back from Australia. And so in February, I started looking for house sits and decided Northern California would be a great place to be for the summer. So you do it by geography and you can set how many days or weeks you want to sit and what kind of animals. I stick to cats and dogs, but there are horses and chickens and goats and lots of things you can take care of. And so that's how I got into it. And I love it. I mean, some people probably think I'm crazy, but I love it.
So now I know from the marketplace story in our prior conversation that you have recently done this as part of a sort of quit of your corporate life and your segue into your autonomous chapter, which is my term for, retirement, right? So tell us how you felt when you kind of like figured out, hey, I've got this figured out from a financial standpoint. And if I don't have the overhead of the roof, then I will be able to quit my job and make this big change in my life. How did that feel?
I basically looked at what was in my retirement account, what was in my investment account, what was in savings and said, this is going to last me X amount. It'll last me longer. There was not a lot of math involved, Laura, because it's not a lot of money, but it was like, I know that I can blow this. And one of the things I was looking at was a round the world trip, which would have blown on a cruise, which would have blown the entire thing, but I would have been covered for a year. And then I would have had to go back to work. And then, of course, there were like 5 plans, Laura. I joke that I'm on plan AA, because I went through A through Z and now I'm on plan AA.
Right,
but it's so I knew what I had. And I was talking to a number of friends. We were talking about Mexico. A lot of US and Canadian retirees, go down to Mexico just because it's cheaper. And I get it. So the sailing away thing was timing. The ships were just starting to sail again in August of 21. So they were practically under my budget, giving it away for a solo traveler for a balcony cabin. I probably could have gotten it for even less if I wanted an interior cabin for like $500 a week. And you got to remember, people, but cruises are so expensive. That's all my food, my laundry, exercise, gym, the whole thing, right? So when I did that math, I was like, sign me up for 4 weeks back to back. And I kept sailing up and down. And every time I got off on Tuesday in Puerto Vallarta, I looked for an apartment. I found an apartment, wasn't ready, started sailing again. Came back. It was just one of those, but it fit. I've got to pay if I have to pay. I wasn't in the house sit mindset, but because I was trying to get down to Mexico. And I probably could have looked for house sits in Mexico, but I wasn't aware about the expat community as much. And I wanted to be near water. There's a lot of folks that live inland, beautiful places, inland Mexico, Mexico City, San Miguel Allende, lots of beautiful places, but I wanted on the water. So I decided, I'll find an apartment. And then when I looked at the prices, they were much cheap. I mean, a lot cheaper, obviously, than living in San Diego, especially. And so that was sort of how it happened. But I kind of just looked at what I had and said, look, you can make this work. Okay. And you're just going to have to, I don't consider it making compromises, but it's certainly not the lifestyle of bringing in 6 figures a year. That's okay. I'm good with that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about priorities, right? So you have talked a lot about downsizing in some of your own content. And I know that you've mentioned that your downsizing is a process and it keeps evolving over time. So in this particular case where you left your job and you went and got on the cruise ship for 4 weeks and then you started house sitting, what did you do with your things?
Everything in San Diego went. And again, when I in Las Vegas, when I came back from Australia and finished that housing and got a job, I was very conscious of what I put in that apartment. Like there was no extraneous stuff. And like, I think sometimes people buy an entire set of china, five cups, 5 bowls, 5, that thing. I needed 2 plates and 2 bowls and a set of silverware and literally went to a thrift shop.
Right.
I'm not entertaining. I don't need all this stuff. And if I can't wash the dishes, then shame on me. So when I downsized, again, the clothing was the issue because I had a set of business clothing, I had athletic clothing, and I had casual clothing, right? It all went. And the first thing that went was business. And I had a nice wardrobe because I was not a minimalist in that way. And I was working towards it, but not there by any standard, and got rid of it. And part of that purge was leaving that business life behind. So I was really kind of glad to so I sold it, I donated it, everything went 5 suitcases onto, and that was the thing. So I had to get the suitcases to the port, but once I got on board, it didn't matter how many suitcases I had. So once I got on the ship, it didn't matter, but I packed 1 for the cruise ship. And there were other things besides clothing in there. And found the apartment in Puerto Vallarta for 7 months. There with 5 suitcases. I mean, my life, including like all the paperwork. Yes, you digitized it, but if they want your birth certificate, you better freaking have it, right? So there are papers that you have to have with you. And so there's that, and then some other things and some artwork, not artwork, but painting stuff and things like that. And by the time I left Puerto Vallarta, about 7 or 8 months later, I was down to 2 suitcases and just said, I'm done. I don't need this anymore. And
why? Why were you done?
I was tired of schlepping it. I was also a traveler. Even when I was with my ex, we were carry-on people. So when I traveled in the past, it was, reuse, laundry, couple pairs of comfortable shoes and go, and no checked luggage, except if maybe we came back and we bought some fun stuff. That was okay. So this whole thing of lugging these, and I didn't mind porters and things helping me, but the idea of not being independent enough to kind of whiz through, whatever, it really irked me. So now I've got 2 suitcases, 1 checked, 1 carry-on, and a backpack, for the plane with my electronics and stuff in it. And it's much better. And I'm going to go do another downsizing again. I do have 2 very small lockers in Chicago when I left Chicago. So I went from Puerto Vallarta to Chicago and didn't house sit there because it was summertime, and people don't leave Chicago in the summertime, really and truly, because that's the best time to be there. And it had like the air mattress and a 1 wingback chair, and then some other clothes, all the little kitchen things, bought a toaster oven, things like that. And so now I've decided I'm not going back there. So I'm going to go back, see friends this summer, empty it all out. So, and they weren't expensive. Like I've had friends that have been paying $500 a month for a storage locker. And I'm like, that's money I could take on a cruise. Yeah. So these are very inexpensive. So I didn't mind. And I needed that time to sort of process it, because I really thought when I left Chicago, I may be coming back for the summer. And then in Australia, I was like, oh, Northern California, that's better. Let's go there. It's like, you've been in Chicago, you've lived in Chicago. No, let's not do that. So that's sort of that freedom. And if the only thing that was holding me in Chicago was the storage lockers, who cared? Like, it didn't break the budget.
Yeah. So it sounds like this has been sort of an evolution for you. And I recently wrote a, short little blurb in my community online about how change is like pivoting is kind of like a shuffle. You think of pivot as like this dramatic, like change in your life, but it's really, like little incremental changes. You get used to the little bit of change, and then you make the next little change. And so it's not so painful to change because you just do it a little bit at a time.
I guess, that whole thing about change agent in that little, subtitle that I had in my professional career, I was a 40 years in philanthropy, doing fundraising mostly, but nonprofit management as well. And, that whole thing about move my cheese and change is always happening. I was always brought in to make change, either create something new or fix something that should be better. So to apply it to myself in this way, yes, it's an evolution, but also I think the purge in San Diego to get down to Mexico probably took a little shorter. It was probably only 2 or 3 weeks, whereas I took like 90 days in Australia. I knew I was going to do it. So it was kind of a slow burn, but I just had more time to spend on it. So San Diego was like, out of here, just get rid of this stuff. And then this stuff, I think on the road, so I've been on the road for 2 years, is just definitely an evolution. Oh, you've not worn that dress, honey. Why are you carrying it with you? I think I have too many pairs of shoes, but I love shoes. And I do, I go to the gym, and then I go to the pool, and then, then I want to go out, and I don't want to wear my fit flops. I'd like to wear something nicer. There's still that in me a little bit. So I'm still always refining that. And I posted in some Facebook group, and she said, oh yeah, I have 17 pieces. And I said, well, I got invited to a black tie and 2 black ties. Hadn't been to a black tie in 10 years or whatever, 2 black ties in Melbourne. I said, there was nothing in my wardrobe, and I went out and shopped for them, and I don't care because I can roll them up and stick them in. Okay, fine, done. Is there something in the locker in Chicago? Probably, but stuff happens. So whatever.
So about that locker in Chicago, do you have any like heritage family pieces in there?
I haven't had any heritage family pieces. My ex and I moved out of an apartment, and it had a basement, and we had boxes down there, and we realized we had been moving with bank stuff we didn't need, the 7-year thing. So, I mean, the amount of stuff that we got rid of so we didn't have to move it again. And then I found sort of the photo albums, as well as all my slides from Australia from when I was there in 1981 as a student. And I just said, I'm done. So I took, we had cameras. So I do have some pictures, like I digitized myself, not sending it to a service. I just took pictures of those. And now as I'm writing and looking back, I'm going, oh, some of those probably would have been helpful in telling these stories, but it was 1981 was before cell phones, right? So whatever. It's a problem with aging, Laura, stuff just. So the only things that I remember, I had mom's china and silver. Actually, I still have the 6 pieces of her silver set, but the china's long gone. I have a piece of art that I bought in Australia in 92 that's rolled up. It takes no space, and I'm just not really willing to part with that. I would say those are the only like legacy things that I still have. I have a Turkish rug, gave it to a girlfriend, said, use it until I want it back. If I want it back, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's, kind of the struggle that people have. And especially as, generations are passing down their things at this sort of, my age, I'm getting a lot of things being passed down to me and sorting out, and each time, carving down a little bit, but yet still having a deep thought about, is it really meaningful for me to hold on to this china? Is it benefiting anybody? Am I trying to refer love to them somehow? It's like you have to kind of figure out, how is the stuff playing into your, thoughts about yourself and your relationship with your family and all of that? Because ultimately my grandmother doesn't know that I still have her china, right? So it is, that's kind of an interesting journey that you have to go through in order to get down to 2 suitcases.
Well, I think that whole china and silver stuff was way before this 2 suitcase. I mean, my mom gave that to me probably, I think she actually gave it to me before I got married. And she said, look, I'm not married anymore and I'm not using it. I want it to get used. So for a while, that china and that silver was what Jeff and I used every single day. She said, don't put it in a box. Use it. And if you're not going to use it, do whatever you want with it. So that whole attitude of having the crisp, and we did use it as I was growing up as a child as special china. But then she said, don't do that. Just use it. And I had a lovely story of how she got it. And I know all that and whatever. And then I was just like, I'm just done with it. And I wanted something else for myself to do every day. And so that's what I did. I think that there is a way big difference because I was married for about 18 years and we had some stuff and it was a very easy, amicable, separation. There weren't a lot of assets and things. But I have no children. We had dogs, but I had no children. So this whole thing of paintings, the kid made when he was in kindergarten. So I've read and seen both sides of it. In the minimalist Facebook groups, older parents are going, we are getting rid of this stuff because we don't want our kids to go through it. And on the younger side, they're going, we are now in the process of going through my mom and dad's house and it's horrible. It's just bad. We don't want to do it. It isn't they don't want the stuff. They don't want the stuff, but they just don't want to have to, that has to be a task that they have after their parents have either moved or died, right? So when I read those, I feel, somewhat fortunate that I didn't have kids, I guess, but also that my generation and older are looking at that and going, they don't want it. What am I doing? And the kids have told them, your stuff is up in the attic. And the kids go, we don't care. Get rid of it. So I think everybody has to come to their own terms on it. But in my case, because I didn't have that, I think it does make it somewhat easier. In addition to my mom saying it's only stuff. Who cares? Mm-hmm. And the worst is, and there are a couple situations where I've had to rebuy what I gave away. And it's like, whatever. I can't be bothered by stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I had to, help my mother clean out their house after my father passed a few years ago. And, gosh, that was hard. It was hard also because it had to be kind of happening kind of fast, just from the time frame that you have when you're, in your prime working years to show up and help your mother clean out her house. You don't have time to put the things on eBay that belong on eBay. And so, you have to kind of separate yourself emotionally a little bit from that situation and just like get it done. And yet at the same time, you like mentally come back to that, like, and yet at the same time, it's just stuff. But what does that mean? It's just stuff, right? Everybody says that it's just stuff. But then at the same time, we all like struggle with this.
Well, so do you remember the show on TLC? I can't remember what it was called, but they had a donate pile, a keep pile, and a trash pile. And he would make them go through it really, really fast and don't think about it, that sort of thing. And I would watch that show going, oh my God, how did they get all that stuff? Like, it's insane, So to me, it was, I loved watching it, but I was like, yeah, get rid of that. What are you talking? I don't know how old those roller skates are. Just get rid of them. Like, what are you doing? So I think, what are we attaching to? I think it goes back to the beginning of this conversation of the freedom that we have in how we're choosing to live today. Mm-hmm. So you can live in $1 million mansion in 25,000 square feet and fill it up any way you want to do it. Or You can live in a van, or you can live without a permanent roof over your house. But I don't even think of them as compromises. I prefer to think of them as either opportunities or choices. We're adults, we're sentient human beings, make decisions that are right for you. And if that pile is important to how you choose to live, keep it. Fine, stick it in a storage locker and come back to it every year and pay it homage and then go on your trip again. Or, so I think it's different for everybody and nobody says it's right or wrong. I just think, for me, I'm lucky because I know folks who are trying to do what I'm doing and they're trying. And the other thing is I have no debt except for my car loan. That's the only debt I have. So that's also giving you freedom, right? To make different decisions. So the definition for stuff, I think, is different for different people.
Sure.
Mental stuff, physical stuff, all of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you, I'm sure, are getting, comments from your followers about this, since this has been, something that you've been so clear about on your downsizing. It's like right there on your homepage. And then you've got, friends who have known you your whole life. So what are you hearing from people in your life about what's going on with you right now and your, downsizing piece? And what do you think some of the struggles are? Just what are you hearing from people about you and your lifestyle and downsizing?
Well, I think my friends know me, and, I don't have a lot of acquaintances. I guess I've also downsized the friends, and it isn't about haters or lovers or whatever. It's just, I don't need hundreds of acquaintances. There's close. So my close friends have followed my journey from the beginning and are probably not surprised by any of this. And they were the friends that when I started my business in 1986 were supportive, as opposed to the ones that said, well, you should really just go get a job. I'm thinking this is a job. I don't understand. I'm starting a consulting practice, so those people are gone. So from the friends, they're fine. And they're also travelers in their own way, but they're also still working. All of them are still working. So they travel like normal people do when they have vacation. Those on either Facebook or on the blog or on YouTube, you're living my dream life. One day I want to be you. I couldn't live like that, and I think it was funny. I was thinking about this the other night. There's probably a bunch of heebie-jeebie about sleeping in someone else's bed. And the sheets have been changed. I mean, this place, she had the cleaners there the day I arrived, and the place was cleaner than I cleaned my own apartment, probably, and everything was changed and beautiful. And I don't worry about stuff like that. Unfortunately, I'm a pretty good sleeper. So any bed is good to me. And I've often fallen asleep on the couch at home. So whatever. So I think it just depends. And I think the reverse of, when something goes wrong, 400 people talk about it. And when something goes right, only one person talks about it. So I think this is sort of the reverse, that I hear more of, I want to be you, or I'm meeting people that are 4 years ahead of me, people that are working towards this debt-free life, questions about how do you do the house sitting? How do you get a house sit? How do you, what are the apps, that sort of thing. So I'm more than happy to share whatever I've done. And I run up I'm in my head trying to do this video about, what can go wrong when you house sit, and stuff does go wrong. Whatever. We're all adults. You figure it out.
Yeah, I'm sure. So what do you say to people out there that are, thinking about doing something different, whether it's house sitting or, traveling more, who seem held back? How do you kind of urge them on? Do you try to urge them on?
Well, if they want to be urged on, but my deal is I'm kind of all in because I was comfortable with it, right? And I've been a traveler for all of my life. What I suggest is do it for a weekend or a week. Car, plane, whatever you're comfortable with. I think if you haven't house sat before, you may not get a house sit because you don't have any background, but you could give it a try. And I will tell you, at my age, which is 63, there's a little bit more trust, I think, than in some younger folks, because they've told me this during interviews. We're so glad that you're sort of a mature adult, and they worried about some of the younger folks that they talk to. And of course, your house is your biggest asset, right? So they want to protect that and then the animal. So I tell them, just try to go away And the other thing is the solo thing. I don't know if I can travel alone. I said, go to the next town over and stay in a hotel and discover every museum known to man in that area. I don't know, so small steps to change.
That pivot shuffle that I was just talking about, right? Just little bits at a time. So I always want to bring this back and just, kind of hone in on the financial independence piece. And earlier you were talking about how that your nest egg, wouldn't have afforded you, the same freedom had you not eliminated the roof. And so, talk a little bit about how you feel that minimalism and financial independence are tied together.
Well, I think the less you need, the less money you need, right? I mean, if you're not going out to dinner every night and you're not paying rent or a mortgage every night, that sort of thing, then you don't need that income. I took Social Security at 62, which is a financial decision. I am not a financial advisor. So whoever's listening, you make your own decisions, but I did the math between 62 and 70 and it didn't seem worth waiting. So that is my primary income at this point. And I had paid in since I was 13. So darn it, that's my money. So I decided to take it. And I just knew that if that was my overhead, and I knew I was paying outrageous rent in San Diego, but I was bringing in bank. So not who cared, but I could afford it. And I knew I couldn't afford that lifestyle if I wanted to not work anymore. I've not touched the retirement fund. It is still intact. I've not had to do that. The investment fund has gone up and down. Well, the retirement fund has gone up and down too, but the investment fund has gone up and down, and I pull from it if I need to. My goal is not to have to need to, but I look at it and go, okay, yeah, that's got enough in it that'll last me a while, including the Social Security. So I think the less you need, the less money you need. You don't need to go out to dinner every night. You don't need to go out to breakfast. I mean, food is another thing, right? You need food, but obviously shopping, and I've been going to the farmers markets here. California is expensive. I think the farmers market is at least a better quality food for the amount you're paying. And there's some beautiful, beautiful restaurants around here. And I have chosen that I will just be at home, sitting out in this gorgeous backyard I have here and, enjoying. So, but some people say that's not a vacation. Well, I'm not on vacation. This is my life. So this is another thing we talk about when you're long stay or slow-mo vacation, slow-mo travel. You can't live like you're on vacation 365 days a year because vacation is more expensive than your daily life, even if you're earning income. So I think minimalism to me is really about the stuff. I don't feel like my life is shortchanged or minimal because I'm not going out to eat or because I don't know what else I'm missing. I don't know. I'm still going to museums, but I leverage my Art Institute Museum membership all over the world. I find free park things to do, or I decide to go to a concert. So I think it's more of a decision making. Minimalism is about the stuff I'm carrying around with me, and the financial part are how I choose to spend those dollars and when I choose. So in Chicago, I was paying rent for 7 months. Well, that was a big chunk. And I paid for rent a little bit in Melbourne after the house sit. So, it all worked out, but now I have 7 months of free living. It's a balance.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, money is fuel. And if you put your fuel towards what's most important to you and, how you want to live your life, there are people who want to fuel eating out all the time or, some level of house luxury, right? That's important to them. So they fuel that thing. And if that isn't what's important to you, you fuel what is important to you. And it sounds like that what's important to you is the freedom to live different places, see different things, and also to run your media empire that you have created for yourself and have the freedom to tell your story and let your voice be heard. And whatever happens with that from an, monetization standpoint happens. But in the meantime, you're getting to share your life with other people. And that's more important than the work that you were doing in the past.
And it's funny, this whole media empire, thank you for saying that. It's hardly that. It probably started in February because in Australia, I have dear friends there and we're talking and we hadn't seen each other in a while. I'm telling them what I'm doing. They said, you need to write this down. Like people don't know this. They don't understand what you're doing. So and I'd had a blog before about fundraising. So I said, okay, you know what, let me do that. So I spent like 2 weeks and made the blog and I knew how to do a podcast. So I started with the podcast thing. And then somebody mentioned YouTube and I said, okay, let me, take a look at that. I was not a YouTube person at all. I was more of a Google search person, but not a YouTube person. And so now I've decided to do that. And one of the things that I've learned, it's influence first and income later. And so it's more a matter of just sharing what I know. And I only did it, honestly. I was telling people about things like using your points and how you house sit and solo cruising and all that. They go, how did you figure all this out? And to me, it just seems so like you just figure it out. So now it's like, well, if I can share it with folks and they can do the same thing, go at it, and take whatever pieces work for you. But to me, it's just sort of the natural state of being a traveler. You got to figure stuff out, right? Mm-hmm. So it wasn't this media empire. It was more of just let me just share this stuff because other people might find it interesting. So far, it hasn't quite caught on like a firehouse, but, it's caught on.
Hey, you are on the national market news?
NPR Marketplace, yes. Well, us NPR nerds know what that is. There you go.
Awesome. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for spending some time with me and sharing all of your great wisdom that, came all the way from your childhood. I mean, that first downsize that you had certainly taught you an important lesson that it sounds like carried throughout your entire life. And I'm sure that people that are listening are thinking about all their options, and downsizing and getting rid of some of the stuff is going to be really important no matter what route they go. So thanks for sharing all of that. And we look forward to catching up with you another time.
Laura, thanks so much for reaching out and for doing this. And your folks can find me at Where's Babs with a Z on all the platforms. And I'd love to hear from them and answer whatever questions they might have. But thank you so much for doing this and for sharing all that you share with all of us, because it's invaluable to our lifestyles.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll put all the links in the show notes so you'll be able to find Where's Babs anytime.
Thanks, Laura. Have a great day.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Less House, More Moolah. To access valuable financial tips and resources tailored to your tiny living journey, join our exclusive community at thetinyhouseadvisor.com. Here you'll find a supportive network of like-minded individuals committed to helping each other navigate the challenges and celebrate the victories of embracing a minimalist lifestyle. So don't miss out on the opportunity to be part of this empowering tribe. Be sure to tune in next Thursday for another insightful episode of Less House, More Moolah, where we'll continue to explore practical solutions and inspiring stories to help you create the life you've always dreamed of.
Please see the show notes for important disclosure regarding the Tiny House Advisor LLC and this episode.